Hello students. Welcome back to my channel, the Goddess of Econ. Today, I will cover the topic of consumer surplus, for those students who know calculus. Yes, this is a special lecture for all you sexy brains. So if you are that sexy brain, please follow me. In my last lecture entitled, What the Hell is Consumer Surplus? I have explained that consumer surplus is simply the shaded area under the linear demand curve, as depicted in the graph here. Since the shaded area takes a triangular form under the assumption of a linear demand, the calculation of consumer surplus was easy. That is 1/2 times height times base, which in this graphical example is 1/2 times P max minus P star times Q star. Simple, wasn't it? But how about the case where the demand curve is not linear? Let's look at the following example. Now, the demand curve is clearly non-linear. If the market price is at P star and the corresponding quantity is Q star, then the area representing consumer surplus can be drawn as follows. Due to the nonlinear nature of the curve, the area of that shaded region cannot be calculated based on the simple formula that we have previously used. So, how do we calculate the area of the shaded region? Well, in 2 steps as follows. First, we calculate the entire area under the demand curve up to the point where Q equals Q star. Just for your information, that entire area under the curve is sometimes called gross consumer surplus. So, in order to calculate the amount of that gross consumer surplus, we need to find the value of the following definite integral. Given the demand curve represents the inverse demand function, P of Q, the area under the curve is simply the definite integral of P of Q, from Q equals 0 to Q equals Q star. Now, what else do we need to do? Well, we need to subtract the area of that red rectangle from the gross consumer surplus to get the net consumer surplus figure, which is what we are looking for. And that area is simply P star times Q star. Not too difficult, isn't it? So the consumer surplus, or sometimes called the net consumer surplus, can be calculated by subtracting P star times Q star from the amount of gross consumer surplus, which is represented by the definite integral here. And sometimes this is rewritten as follows. The definite integral of P of Q minus P star with respect to Q, from 0 to Q star. These 2 expressions are essentially equivalent to each other. So, don't get confused. They mean the same thing. I'd also like to point out that, some other times, you may be confronted with the consumer surplus equation written in another way, that is, the definite integral of Q of P from P equals P star to P equals P max. A bit confusing, isn't it? Would these 2 seemingly different integrals lead to the same values? Well, there is an easy way to check. To see their equivalence in an easy and simple way, let's rotate this graph to the left, perhaps by 90 degrees. If we do that, then we have Q, the quantity, on the y-axis, but the x-axis doesn't look right. It is extending to the left, the negative territory, so it seems the x-axis now has negative values, not positive. To fix this, let's flip the graph to the right, and create its mirror image. If we do that, we have Now it looks okay to me. Maybe except for the letters which look kind of like alien language, due to our rotating and flopping exercises. Anyway, now we have quantity on the y-axis, and price on the x-axis. This means that what we have now is the graph of the demand function, not the inverse demand function. For your information, the demand function is written as Q of P, whereas the inverse demand function is P as a function of Q. Haha, blame all those darn economists who made this field as confusing as possible. As a divine goddess, I pity you human beings. Anyway, now I believe you can clearly see that the area of the shaded region can be calculated by setting up a definite integral of the demand function, Q of P, with respect to P, over the interval from P star to P max. And this area is consumer surplus. In summary, consumer surplus can be expressed as the definite integral of the inverse demand function, P of Q, from Q equals 0 to Q equals Q star, minus P star times Q star. Or it can be written as the definite integral of P of Q minus P star, over the interval from 0 to Q. Alternatively, consumer surplus can be written as the definite integral of the demand function, Q of P, over the interval from P star to P max. Hope now it is clear. Hope all you sexy brains have mastered the concept of consumer surplus through my lecture today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Do visit my channel often as there's a lot more to come. May God bless you all.